Hey guys, great show coming up right after this. Time for some comedy stuff. I saw Trainwreck. Did you see it? It's very funny. Written by Amy Schumer, directed by Judd Apatow. And get this, two sports icons almost steal the show in this movie. I am not kidding. Basketball player LeBron James, professional wrestler John Cena. Seriously, all of us taking classes, go see this film. See what happens to people who are just really fit and strong and craft their bodies to play sports, and they go do comedy. And they're incredible. And it's just amazing to watch. Go see it for John Cena and LeBron James. Of course, everyone in the movie's great too. But they're the shockers, the hidden, holy smokes, look how funny sports people can be. I also got to meet Amy very briefly. But I did get to hear some of what she had to say and some of the other cast members, what they had to say about their family's perception of their fame, the dangers of social media, and I wanted to share this with you. For starters, Vanessa Bayer, who's in the film and incredibly funny, she says that her grandmother watches her on Saturday Night Live. And you would think this is hugely successful, right, to be on Saturday Night Live, but to her grandmother, she says, you know, Vanessa, if you just keep doing what you're doing, one day you could be on The View. There you go. Grandmothers. Amy, here's what she has to say about social media. Awful, horrible, comparing yourself to other people. Just an awful assault to the self-confidence and the self-esteem. However, it was actually comparing herself to someone else that ultimately drove her into the action that has now paid off big time to her current success. Here was the catalyst, was Whitney Cummings, when Whitney, really we can just say Whitney, right? She's the Oprah of stand-up. Whitney sold 2 network shows, which is very unprecedented. She sold Whitney and 2 Broke Girls. And when this happened, Amy Schumer found herself feeling, quote, a pang, end quote, a pang in her gut. She called her manager and said, what do I do? This girl, she sold 2 scripts. And her manager said, well, write a script. And bam, Amy discovers she's great at writing scripts too. Then she gets noticed by Judd Apatow because she's in an interview with Howard Stern and he likes it. So her and Judd get together and she writes a draft of a screenplay. Judd says, dig deeper. Amy digs deeper and she digs so deep that he says, are you sure you even want this in the movie? And she says, yes. And she's brilliant. They're both brilliant. And the movie's brilliant. You can't not have fun at this movie. So thank you, Whitney Cummings, for inciting the pang. Lots of laughter because of that. I know the pang, do you? Most of us have. If we're honest with ourselves, we felt the pang. And I have a theory that there's a difference between a jealous feeling and an envious feeling. I think jealousy is if someone has something that you just can't get. For example, genetics. Okay, somebody just looks amazing because of their genes, and you can't have that. Trust funds, right? Maybe there could be a bit of jealousy over somebody who has a trust fund because you haven't got one. However, envy, I feel, is when someone has something and deep down in your subconscious, you actually believe you're capable of getting that or doing that, but maybe you don't even consciously recognize it, but you feel envy. And I think that's your body's way of saying, hey, you can do that too. Very important to pay close attention to your gut. And I'm not talking about your waistline. I'm talking about all those feelings in your body because they're way smarter than we give them credit for. Amy Schumer's gut knew before her brain that she was capable of writing some insanely hot comedy. And speaking of insanely hot comedy, you probably have one or more favorite people in the field of comedy, right? And depending on how old you are, those favorite people may fall into different eras of comedy. Maybe you liked SNL in the 80s, or Seinfeld in the 90s, or stars of current shows like Portlandia or Key and Peele. For me, one of my all-time favorite comedy heroes was John Candy. I could choke up thinking about it because I always wanted to meet him and maybe even work with him. I'll fess up, I dreamed of working with John Candy, and I never did. And I remember like it was yesterday where I was the moment I found out that he had passed at age 43. I was a stand-in a movie in Toronto called Getting Gotti, and I was Lorraine Bracco's stand-in. I had a little dark wig that I wore, and we were on a street in Toronto, and I heard the news from a crew member, and I was just devastated. Such a great injustice in the world of comedy, as there have been so many injustices in the world of comedy and entertainment of people taken way too soon. Well, today we're going to talk to one of the founding members of I.O., formerly Improv Olympic in Chicago. And you are forewarned, there is going to be some name dropping because this man has worked with them all. Mark Beltzman came through the ranks of Second City, the improv company that forged talents like Chris Farley, John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, Joan Rivers, Steve Carell, Mike Myers, and more. And Mark is going to tell us what it was like working on the set of Seinfeld, working with the late, great John Candy. And he's going to talk about the personal struggles felt by so many outstanding talents like Chris Farley and Del Close. Here's the man himself, Mr. Mark Beltzman. Hey, Mark Beltzman.
Hi, what is happening?
We're at your pretty cool and trendy, can I just say, Hollywood pad.
My swanky Hollywood apartment, yes.
You've got the swankiest apartment that I could imagine for an improviser.
Oh, thank you.
Clearly improv does well for people.
Well, we're all very fortunate to be doing what we're doing and being creative and having fun and making money at it.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing.
Well, I'm very privileged that you took time out to meet with me today because I feel you're definitely improv royalty.
Oh, well, that's very flattering. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think do you feel that there's sort of a tier of comedy and an era that you look at and it was like, oh, that was the golden era of improv and comedy?
Well, for me, yeah, of course. There was others before me, and it's just passed from generation to generation, starting with Viola Spolin, who invented the art form. She wrote a book called Improvisation for the Theater, and she's the mother of improvisation, which was actually written to help troubled children in social worker with social work intentions. But yeah, there was in the late 80s, that's when I got to Chicago. There's actually a Facebook page that's exciting to look at called Chicago from 1985 to 1995. And I worked at Second City from 1985 to 1991.
Now, was that the first round of Second City or was...
Oh, no, Second City started in 1959.
Okay.
Yeah. I was one of the first groups and a charter member of I.O., formerly Improv Olympic. I was in the first group called Barron's Barracudas, and that's how basically I.O. was born, out of that workshop and that group. And,
what does charter member mean?
Just one of the first founding members. I was in the very first group that started I.O., Barron's Barracudas.
Do you have some sort of part ownership in the I.O. chain?
No. That's all belongs to Sharda Halpern and Del Close, and Del's no longer with us. He's the father of improvisation, or the guru of improvisation. He was the acting coach for the Not Ready for Primetime players, and everybody who's anybody in comedy as we know it today. I mean, Del basically shaped comedy as we know it today. So all the people that he directed and people who studied with him were, Bill Murray, John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, all the beginning founding members of Second City. There's Alan Arkin and Mina Kolb and Ed Asner, Joan Rivers. They all went through Second City. And So it has a very elaborate, very famous alumnus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I went through Second City in Toronto quite a long time ago when I used to live there. Oh, did you?
Yeah, well, I was doing a movie there called Billy Madison. I co-starred in a movie with Adam Sandler. And so the whole time I was in Toronto, I would go to Second City every week and do the improv set and hang out with the cast. And that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that time.
What year was that?
I want to say 94. I think 1993.
I was living there
94.
then. I could have seen you.
You probably did. Maybe you did.
Well, you'll know then the Second City, the old fire hall.
Oh, of course. The old fire hall was amazing. That was like, talk about royalty. That place was great.
Well, I got an apartment across the street from that.
Really?
That's how enamored I was with Second City, is that I got my apartment, when I walked in and I was looking for places, the yellow Second City flag was waving in the window of the kitchen. So it was pretty instant.
Yeah. So that was a great place to work. I really love that.
So you got to go up. Was Mike Myers still there at that time, or he'd gone?
No, I met Mike Myers. He came to Chicago. He worked at Second City in Chicago, so I worked with him as well. But that was in Chicago. He was one of the few transplants who actually transferred from Toronto to Chicago. Very few people actually did that. Back in the day, they would switch casts. Toronto started in 1973. Chicago started in 1959. So, like in the mid to late 70s, some cast members would go back and forth. I know John Candy was sent to Chicago, and Dan Aykroyd. Those guys were that was around that era. So those guys would come back and forth, and it was more of a close knit family. It was kind of a mom and pop organization. Now it's a huge corporation, and improv is a huge business. When I started 33 years ago doing this art form, it wasn't a business at all. It was simply an art form, and we did it because we loved it. Nobody got paid to do improvisation. And now it's a worldwide entrepreneurial endeavor and a great occupation.
Yeah, well, the business of teaching improv is pretty huge, especially in New York and LA.
Yeah. Chicago, don't forget Chicago.
Yeah, that's right, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I get to teach all over the world now, and I have a pedigree and a resume that allows me to basically send an email and teach anywhere in the world, which I'm very fortunate enough to be able to do. And in between doing movies and television, I love to teach and play music. I play the tuba. So I get to go from one thing to another, and I love everything I do, and I get to do it all. I get to do movies, television, commercials, theater, musicals, play music, teach improv, do improv, and I love every second of everything I do. It's really exciting. You're
living the life that when kids are little and think, I just want to grow up and have fun and do what I love.
It's true. I mean, I'm envious of my own life. I look at Facebook pictures and posts and I got, man, this guy's got a really great life, and it happens to be me.
You think that bastard? He's got such a great life.
No, I'm a new person. I'm really happy for everybody's success. The more successful people are, the more opportunity we all have to be successful, and so you kind of have to look at it that way. Because if you start comparing yourself to other people, you're fucked.
Right.
You can't do that. You're on your own path. You're on your own journey, and enjoy every second of it. Be there. Enjoy where you're at while you're there. That's the key, really.
Did you ever go through, at least when you in your earlier years, where you would compare?
Oh, yeah. I spent most of my life, bitching and complaining. And I always say, you want to hear an actor bitch, give him a job, because that's all we do is bitch. We bitch when we're working. We bitch when we're not working. So I've really learned to, rewire my brain to be grateful and appreciate what I have more than what I don't. So that's very helpful and allows us to go through life with a smile on our face instead of disgruntled forehead figuring out what the hell you can do differently.
Like the majority of people.
When I teach, that's one of the principles of what I teach is figure out what's working and do more of it instead of trying to change and fix what's wrong. And we call it improv and acting, and it's really just life lessons. It's just stuff you should be doing everywhere and anytime. Make your partner look good, you look twice as good. Replace thinking with listening. Be in the moment, be truthful, honest, and real. Those are all the principles of improvisation, and truly, they're the principles of life as well. Hide nothing, and you have nothing to hide.
Well, you say make your partner look good. You actually have a long-term marriage, don't you?
Yeah. I've been with my wife 33 years, and we have a good time. She's a good lady, and I love her. She's really great. Her name's Beverly Lubin, and
clearly you make her look good.
Yeah, we do a good job of that with each other, I think. It's fun.
So before you were enlightened and stopped comparing yourself, did you have certain people that you were like, that's whose career I want. That's who I want to be like?
Oh, well, you still do that, but now it's not out of anger. It's just out of, wanting to evolve. We all want to be better, and we all want to get better. But there's no such thing as making it, you see. I mean, even there's somebody making $1 million a movie, there's somebody making 8. And the guy who's making 8 wants to be better because there's somebody making 12. And the guy who's making 12 wants to be better because there's somebody making 20. So there's no such thing. It's always about evolving and being better and wanting to grow.
Have you found it more challenging now, because you've been through it all? Now we're in the age of social media, and you're on Facebook and you're active. You promote your courses. Do you think it's more challenging now not to be comparing to people when it's in our face every day on our timeline? Hey, I'm in this show. I landed this job.
Well, it's all a matter of perspective, really. Certainly, the Facebook thing and the social media thing is kind of weird because it's still sort of new and it's still fresh. And there's a fine line between putting it out to the universe and bragging about it. And I think it can be perceived either way. And I see the value in both. And I also see, sometimes that it can be a little bit overwhelming to start to compare yourself and see who's doing what and where and how and why. But you just have to know and realize that no matter where you're at, there's somebody who's jealous of you.
You've come up with people who are, definitely inspirations, as are you, to performers. Who were the close people in your circle of improv that you came up the ranks with?
Well, David Pasquesi, TJ Jagodowski, TJ and Dave and I were in the first group at I.O. called Barron's Barracudas, which I mentioned earlier, and Joel Murray, who's has a great career in his own right and is working all the time. He's happens to be Bill Murray's little brother, and so I've known that family for a long time. And Chris Barnes is a great artist. He now is in the bar business. He owns Flaming Saddles Saloon. There's one in New York and there's one here in West Hollywood. And he's also a musician and an artist in his own right, and is doing a lot of great music stuff. And there's tons of other people. Certainly, there's all the Mike Myerses, Chris Farleys, and Bonnie Hunt, and all those great people who went through Second City before and while I was there. And after me, the Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, Amy Poehler, and Tina Fey. And
have you worked with those guys, the UCB guys?
Yeah, most of them. I've worked with almost all of them or know them, and very proud of what they've accomplished and strive to do more for myself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What's Bill Murray's family like? What kind of dynamics?
They're exactly what you would think. They're really down-to-earth, fun people who are very smart and very witty and like to have fun. And they're a fun group to hang out with, yeah.
When you, I guess you did a fair amount of improv with John Candy.
On set, yeah. I got to do 2 movies with him. If you were asking me my favorite actor I've ever worked with, hands down, it would be John Candy. He was just the loveliest man, very sweet, very generous, never wanted to be alone, didn't go to his trailer. I'll give you a couple quick John Candy stories. There's one, there was on the set of Home Alone, John Hughes was standing and talking to Chris Columbus, and it was the first movie he directed, and John Candy, and of course I knew them all because I was working on the movie, and they knew I was a Second City guy, and they go, Mark, come over here, we're trying to figure out the scene. We're going to be in the back of the van, and you have any ideas? And I said, yeah, sure, and came up with all this great stuff. And then John Candy only had 1 day to shoot that movie. And so we were going on hour 20.
Good grief.
We'd been shooting for 20 hours straight. And they said, okay, fuck it. We're just going to do a 2-shot on Catherine O'Hara and John Candy. You guys pretend like you're asleep in the back of the van instead of doing all the stuff we'd talked about. And then they yelled action, and John Candy said all the stuff I had came up with in that meeting that earlier that day, and they all cut. And John Candy looks at me and he goes, "Hey, I used all your stuff. I hope you don't mind, kid." And I was like, "No, that was great. It was so awesome." I was so naive. I should have asked for a writing credit or something and got some more money, because it turned out to be one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
Wow. Do you remember some of the lines that he used that you had?
Oh, yeah. Some of them were like, Ziggy didn't even know his kids. And I guess I can't remember all of them.
That's okay. That's fair enough.
Yeah, it was just some stuff he came up with sitting in the van. But that was fun. But yeah, John King was just the most generous guy ever. Really fun.
Generous in what way?
Well, like he did a movie called Only the Lonely with Maureen O'Hara, who was just an icon in movies in like the 50s and 60s, and John Wayne movies and all kinds of stuff. And John showed up to the set, and of course he had a huge trailer, and they put Miss O'Hara in the honey wagon, which is, if you don't know what a honey wagon is, it's a trailer that's cut up into really small dressing rooms, just big enough so that you have someplace to change in a bathroom. And so John Candy showed up and saw her sitting in the honey wagon. He went to the producers and said, "She's an American icon. You can't put her in you got to get her a trailer." And they said, "Sorry, John, there's no money in the budget." And the producers showed up the next day, and she was in his trailer, and he was sitting in the honey wagon. And the producers were like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, of course they had money and came up with a trailer a couple hours later for him." But that's the kind of guy he was. He was just so generous and so giving and loving, and it was a pleasure to work with him. He was always playing, you just look at him and he'd be improvising a scene and going off in a tangent for hours while they were setting up the camera and the lights and doing stuff. And it was just a joy to be around him. He never wanted to be alone. He just wanted to play. He was just a big kid who always wanted to play. And that's what we did. We played.
I remember getting the news, hearing the news, and it's one of those things in my life that I always remember where I was when I heard that news.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. Where were you?
Well, I was in my apartment. I lived over in Mid-Wilshire, and a guy who lived downstairs named Tino Insana was John Candy's best friend. And his phone wouldn't stop ringing, so he came up to my apartment, and we sat and kind of reminisced and talked about it. And then when Chris Farley died, the same thing happened in reverse, and my phone didn't stop ringing. So I went down to his apartment and kind of shared that experience with him. His two best friends were John Belushi and John Candy, Tino Insana's best friends. Bill Murray introduced him and his wife. So he was around back in the day, and he's still in the business. He's a voice on Bubble Guppies right now. Okay. So he does a lot of cartoon animation and stuff.
He didn't sort of continue a career of improv. He turned into voiceover.
No, he's always worked. He's been in movies and television and a writer. He's written a lot of screenplays and stuff. Actually, a couple of them that have been produced.
Were you close with Chris Farley then, I take it?
Farley and I, we weren't the best of friends, but he was originally hired as my understudy at Second City. At least that's what I was told. And then turns out he, of course, went on to Saturday Night Live, and then I replaced him on main stage. So, yeah, we were around the same time and hung out a lot in Chicago together and have the same group of friends. And, yeah, he was just a ball of energy, just brilliant, very charismatic, very funny.
Did you ever have concerns earlier on of, wow, this guy needs to look after himself?
Oh, everybody knew it. We used to make jokes about it that we can, there was all kinds of off-color jokes about him. Not living too long, and unfortunately, it became a reality.
Did people try and stage interventions with him?
Oh, there was many interventions, and we all talked to him, and tried to help him as much as we could. But I think Tom Arnold, when he was married to Roseanne, became really good friends with Chris, and they did the first real intervention. They put him in a limo and told him he was going somewhere, and took him to rehab and forced him to check in, and they were. So, Tom Arnold was pretty close with Chris Farley, and they used to hang out a lot together. And they were both on the same path, and I think Tom has been recovering as well. So they helped him out as much as they could.
I remember when I first moved to LA, his brother was living I was at the Oakwood Apartments, where everybody comes temporarily. and Chris Farley's brother was there. And
Which one, John or Kevin? Or
Kevin rings a bell. I think it was his younger brother. I don't know if they're both younger brothers, but I just remember. I remember hearing about damage, that there'd been a lot of partying and smashing of coffee tables and shenanigans.
Yeah. There was a lot of that stuff. A lot of crazy stories about Chris partying way too hard. That Farley, right after Chris died, the Farley brothers shared an apartment in this building, I think, up on the 12th floor.
The one that we're in right now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a coincidence.
Yeah, John and Kevin, I think, were in the penthouse upstairs.
We're in Farley Morphic Field right now.
Yeah, Farley was a pretty wild guy. I remember one time he came up to me at the bar just out of his mind, and he goes, "I took 7 hits of acid. I told everybody else I only took 3.
Oh, my gosh.
He was just laughing. And, that's the kind of guy he was. Just everything was extreme, over the top, as fast as you possibly could.
It's a wonder he was able to work.
Yeah, well, that's, part of the journey that we're all on is I think it's very common, for comics and actors to get all this praise and all this attention when they're around people, and then they go home and they're alone by themselves. And there's that huge gap of, being waited on hand and foot and everybody saying yes to you, to nobody being around. And that's sometimes difficult to deal with, and unfortunately gets the best of people sometimes. So you have to learn to not put all your eggs in one basket and find other avenues of creativity, and which is why I like doing so many different kinds of things, because I'm always busy, and I'm really good at working hard and staying busy, and I'm also really good at doing absolutely nothing and enjoying my time, my downtime.
Yeah, that's very nice. It sounds very lovely. Mm-hmm. There seems to be, quite a through line of drugs in comedy with a lot of these people that, we say, oh, just a genius. I mean, you're John Belushi's. I mean, how do you kind of make sense, or what's your point of view on the involvement of drugs in comedy? And is it a coincidence that comedy geniuses also are sometimes drug addicts?
No, I don't think there's any coincidence at all. I think if you look throughout history, all the brilliant, prolific writers, whether they be playwrights or novelists and performers and actors and musicians, have all been addicts of one sort of another. And I think it has something to do with the human brain and the human mind, and feeding those endorphins and or releasing those endorphins and those neurons and the connectivity of your brain. Or it's a very right brain, left brain conversation we're having, right? I mean, left brain is analytical, right brain is very creative. And I think very often, I get a lot of work done when I'm high sometimes, and sometimes I don't. So it sort of feeds the creative juices in all of us. I think everybody's addicted to something, whether it be addicted to being healthy and exercise, or whether it's drugs or alcohol. I think everybody needs some kind of regiment and focus to, perpetuate that need to evolve and to grow, no matter what it is, whether it's to be as healthy as you possibly can or to completely destroy your fucking life. I think they're related somehow.
So you mentioned getting high. When you say do a lot of work, are we talking vacuuming or writing comedy?
Oh, but a little bit of everything, but mostly, just being creative and either playing music or sending emails or making the decision to book a show. Those little tasks that we all go through. Some people are great and get up in the morning and do it. I like to do it later at night, and usually it's after I've had a few drinks and maybe some other imbibed substances, but nothing major. And you have to, everything is kind of in small doses, right? Isn't that
my grandmother said, have a little bit of what you love.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has whatever they need to make life as happy as possible.
I've heard you in interviews talk quite a bit about Del Close. Perhaps you'd like to share a bit about that. Again, somebody who, it sounds like, walked on a fine blade of creativity and then some dangerous vices on the other side.
Yeah, I guess we're on that topic.
We're on that topic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Del was another cut from that same cloth. He was he liked to be a kind of a shock jock, they call Howard Stern, but Del liked to shock people. I think that was sort of his things, and he would perpetuate myths and stories. There's several books written about it. There's The Guru, which is written by a guy who was his personal assistant, and in that book, a lot of those myths and stories are perpetuated. And then there's another book written by Kim Howard Johnson, who was in Barron's Barracudas, which was the first group at I.O., and it's called The Lives and Legends of Del Close. And that kind of debunks a lot of the myths and legends. But Del was another character who was very intimidating, but just a genius. And, we kind of throw that word around loosely these days. But, I mean, he truly was. And like I said earlier, he shaped comedy as we know it today. If you name all the people who are really influential in comedy, I mean, even Harold Ramis, who just recently passed from some terrible disease that he had, was a brilliant director, and John Belushi and John Candy and Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and, Gilda Radner. I mean, he worked with all the most amazing people who shaped comedy as we know it today. And so he was very influential in that way. And his career goes way back. I mean, Del was the director of the Committee in the late 60s in San Francisco, where the committee, invented long-form improvisation. They were the first ones to do the Herald and to name the Herald. I talked to Carl Gottlieb, who was part of that group in the committee, and he's prolific career himself. He's a co-writer of the movie Jaws, and he was an actor in that movie and had an amazing career writing and performing in front of the camera, behind the camera. And he said the first time they did the Herald was at the University of Austin in Austin, Texas. And the Herald had always been done up until we started doing it in 1985 as part of another show. It was like in the set at Second City or in the context of some other sketch comedy review. They would throw in this long-form thing. But we at I.O. and in Barron's Barracudas were the first ones to perform long-form as a show in and of itself. So people would come and pay to see long-form improvisation. Wow. And so the committee was, very profound in that way as well. And Del was, part of all of that stuff. So he's an amazing guy and left quite a legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And was he a performer himself or mostly a director?
Oh, a brilliant actor. I mean, a brilliant actor. I saw him do, there's tons of, if you go back, he's in a lot of movies and TV shows. He was in The Untouchables. He was in, The Blob, the remake of The Blob. I think he was actually the Blob in The Blob in a costume or something like that. But I saw him do the role of Polonius in Hamlet, which starred Aidan Quinn and was directed by the great Bob Falls, who's a brilliant, big Broadway director now. And Del was amazing on stage, just so charismatic, and you couldn't take your eyes off him. He was a brilliant performer. So yeah, I mean, he was he worked a lot as an actor, not as much as he should have or could have, but he was really fun to watch. I'll tell you that.
Was his lifestyle ultimately part of his demise, or?
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody's lifestyle is part of the demise. We're all going to die at some point anyway.
But I mean, was it like in the vein of people like Belushi and Chris Farley, where he was having a lot of drugs and it was impacting him?
Well, essentially, I mean, he tried to commit suicide many times. His he would sit on my couch in Chicago, and we'd get high together, and his arms looked like carpeting. He had track marks, and he wore short sleeve white T-shirts all the time. There was one article that once said Del Close wears his track marks like badges of honor. And ultimately, it wasn't really the drugs that killed him. He died basically of chronic emphysema, and he had a hard time breathing and couldn't get out of bed to go teach workshops anymore. And he just said, that's it. As a matter of fact, I called him in the hospital about 24, maybe 48 hours before he died and talked to him on his deathbed and had a nice conversation with him about thanking him for all that he's taught us and left behind and that we'll carry the work on and all that stuff.
What did he say to that?
It was a weird conversation, and he kind of really freaked me out, actually. He said, I want to talk to you about, and he mentioned Farley, and I was like, you want Chris Farley? And he's like, yeah, and because he kind of had chose him to go ahead of me at Second City, and then Chris ultimately went on to SNL, and Del was a Wiccan. He was into being a warlock and witchcraft and all that stuff. He would read runes every morning and stuff, so he was very spiritual in that way. But in that conversation in the hospital, he said he just wanted to tell me that he knew Chris Farley had a short fuse, and that's why he put him ahead of me, and that, I'll have a great career and to not worry about it. And he basically said, your life is a story of the tortoise and the hare, and you're the tortoise and you win. We all got there too fast and burned out. So that was kind of freaked me out for a while, actually.
I mean, in what way? Just thinking that what if he hadn't have had a short fuse?
But somebody says, we're dead and you're alive, and you kind of, that makes you think. It's like, well, wow, I should start being more grateful.
Yeah. Was that a turning point for you? Because I know gratitude is one of the big things in your life that you speak about.
That was certainly probably the beginning of what started to be a change of mind for me. I mean, a few years before that, I had angioplasty at 35 because I was much bigger than I am now.
35 years old?
Yeah, that was sort of the turning point, really.
Wow.
That's kind of what it's like, maybe you need to change some things here. So yeah, that's why I started getting healthier physically and mentally. And then my wife has been on that path and on that journey for years too. So we kind of have been, growing together, which is, what a marriage and a relationship is supposed to be. So that's been helpful to have a partner who's really supportive and to that same mindset. And so those years have all been, very formidable for me.
Yeah, yeah. You listened to Abraham, correct?
Yeah, I'm a huge Abraham Hicks. Yeah. Abraham Hicks is great. If you don't know what it is, just Google it. They have a great book called Ask and It Is Given, which is like the Bible to me, and I've been to their seminars. And, it's all about law of attraction and that we're all creative source energy, and we get to create our lives. And everything you have in your life at this very moment, whether you want it or not, you created. And once you grasp that concept and that idea, then you really starts to dawn on you that your thoughts are influential in your life. Everything is energy. And the more energy you create around being positive and grateful, and the more grateful, positive things happen to you and come to you without any effort, without working for it, without having to be, all the stress, tension, and anxiety involved with trying too hard to be good and better and make money and worrying about whatever it is, relationships, bills, car trouble. That makes no difference. So, the more you focus on that stuff, and Abraham Hicks has been a huge turning point for me, and I really love that. There's some other books too, but that certainly has been a very influential one for me.
For listeners, it's basically the information comes from a channeled entity through Esther Hicks. So clearly you had no problem just taking that at face value, even though there wasn't a person, it was an entity sort of energy coming through. I mean, I've listened and been exposed to it myself. It's incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know, how much I buy into all of that aspect of it, but like Abraham himself/herself says, even if you get the answers or you figure it out, it's not going to make a difference.
It doesn't matter. Don't shoot the messenger kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just get the message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can, poo-poo it or just find something wrong with it. But again, they're life lessons, right? So instead of trying to change and fix what's wrong, figure out what's right and do more of it. So that's how I listen to it now. I once saw the Dalai Lama speak about happiness at USC, and he said, there are no problems, there are only solutions. And if there's no solution, then why are you even thinking about the problem? So that's kind of how I perceive life these days, is just looking at solutions. And if there's no solution, then just move on. So I found that to be very prolific as well.
Yeah, you incorporate those philosophies in your improv, which is how I met you at AFI in your improv class.
Right.
And your particular style, you put it under the umbrella, the art of allowing improv. Is that correct?
Yeah. I borrowed that name, the Art of Allowing Improv Workshops, because that really speaks to me in such a huge, profound way. And I like that idea of letting it happen to you instead of you trying to make something happen is essential for improvisation, for being in the moment. Acting is reacting, and you can't react unless you're listening, and that's why replacing thinking with listening is so important. So it all relates around the idea of being in the moment.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I was just in Maui teaching and performing last week, and I got to meet Ram Dass, who was another huge influential man of that caliber, and that was kind of fun. It was just a random meeting on the beach, and I got to hang out with him. So just for a few minutes, but it was really powerful.
I think there's a maturity in even the sentiment, the art of allowing. I mean, having been myself in entertainment and around it for so many years, you really try and do things. And I find so often that the things happen when you actually stop trying and you put your focus on something else, so that all those efforts you've put into place, you're now allowing them some breathing space to go naturally and organically. You can't control everything, and there's an allowing, which I remind myself of sometimes. You can send out so many emails, then you've got to give some time for people to read those emails and get back to you. You can't just sit there, and you got to allow and trust something is going to happen from your labors.
Yeah, trust is huge. Well, that's another, what you're talking about is another Abraham concept, I think, which is step one is declaring it and putting it out to the universe. Step two is none of your business. That's the universe's job to deal with that. And the third step is the art of allowing, to be in a place where you actually allow it to happen. So, like, if you need some money for bills or whatever you want to buy, and the money comes, and then you go to the store and you're like, well, I can't afford that, or I can't go on that trip because I don't have the money. Then you're putting out more of the energy of what you don't have rather than what you have. And so that art of allowing is really important, to stay in the place where the universe, who has already sent that, whatever that request from the universe is, to you, you just have to be in a place to receive it. And so that's a great, huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously, there was a big wave of The Secret, and the buzz term was law of attraction. And I saw, a lot of people get very much into it with their vision boards and all this, that, and the other. And then a lot of people got disappointed because they weren't putting efforts in.
Well, do you know the story behind that?
Go for it.
Well, The Secret came out of, there was an Australian TV producer who went on a cruise ship to do a documentary about Jerry and Esther Hicks. And after the documentary was finished, Jerry and Esther asked to be removed from the documentary because they wanted to keep their own brand. They just didn't want to be associated with another brand. So they are actually the genesis of The Secret. And then The Secret is a little hokey in the way it's presented, I think. And the missing piece from The Secret is that you got to get in action and do something about it.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so they're actually, Abraham Hicks is the genesis of The Secret.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I find that words will strike me. And I'm a big believer that words carry a lot of power because ultimately it's a vibration. And recently a word struck me and it just gives me a feeling that suddenly I'm in a moment of knowledge. And I saw the word attraction. And I often tend to truthfully, I make fun of it with people, especially in LA. To their faces, I'll tease people and stuff because they'll get really, really into it. And it's a bit of fun. But I saw this word.
It's really fun.
It's really fun, let's face it.
Yeah.
So I saw the word attraction, and suddenly in my mind, it split up into two words. And I felt this sense of a message that attraction, it's attract action. Attract action, be around people who are active, who are doing, that a lot of important things in life come from the people you surround yourself with. And it just sort of struck me in a little moment of just to make a note, make sure that people in your life are actively doing something in their own life to better themselves, to grow. They're not stagnating. But the word itself had carried that message to me, breaking it up, attract action instead of just attraction.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I've attracted through that process myself. I went through Landmark Education, which is great. The Forum, if you'd never heard of it, is a great weekend workshop that changed my life. And Jack Canfield was influential. He wrote a book called The Success Principles. He also is the author of all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. But The Success Principles is a great book. And the first page, I think, it says you have to take 100% responsibility for yourself and your life. But also in that book, they talk about forming a mastermind group, which my wife and I did for years. We had a mastermind group, and we all read the same books and had these conversations and met like once a month just to declare whatever it is you're up to, whether it's you wanted to lose weight, get a new car, or get a job, or just be a better human being, or stop saying no, or be nicer, whatever it is. And then you'd have to show up the next month and talk about whether just to have somebody to hold yourself accountable.
A deadline.
And a deadline or just an ongoing process of being accountable, you see? And that's kind of what a mastermind group is, and exactly what you were just talking about is surround yourself with the same like-minded kind of people. And that's also the principle behind law of attraction, is attracting like-minded people, which is probably why you're here and we're doing this interview and why our chance meeting for just a couple of hours, months and months ago at a Screen Actors Guild workshop led to this interview. So it's working.
Yeah, it is working.
There you go.
And getting back to comedy, you've done quite a bit with Adam Sandler.
I was in a couple of Sandler movies. Yeah, I co-starred in Billy Madison, and then I was had a little part in The Wedding Singer.
And is that through a personal relationship or via mutual comedy friends, or you just auditioned and happened to get a role into it?
Yeah, no, I just sort of, it was just through talent and auditioning Universal. It was Sandler's first big movie on his own that he wrote and produced, and he wanted Alan Covert, who produces and stars in a lot of his movies now, I think was supposed to have my role. And Universal Pictures said no, and they actually they hired me to do that part. And since then, and Sandler has a great group. Talk about a mastermind group. He has a great group of friends that he met at NYU. Tim Herlihy, who writes all of his movies. Jack Garaputo, who produces all his movies, and Alan Covert, and I'm sure there's others I'm missing. But those guys all went to NYU together, and they all work for Sandler's production company, and they all still put out all kinds of production, really amazing stuff. So
yeah, there's these tight-knit groups that you see, and in the credits, the same people working together. I've noticed a lot with Judd Apatow that there's groups of people.
Well, Judd Apatow and Adam Sandler were roommates here in L.A. when they were stand-ups as youth, and I remember Judd Apatow coming to the set of Billy Madison the first time I met him, and so yeah, those guys are very like-minded. You know, they've kind of grew up together.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Cool.
Who are your favorites?
I really have a lot of respect for anybody who's in the creative process and enjoying what they do. And, hopefully we can all, make a living, if not more than that. just enjoying ourselves and going through the process of life. So, anybody who's really creative, I like young people. I like the energy of hanging out with a lot of young, hungry people who aren't jaded by this business. And it's really refreshing to kind of be a mentor or help people because we're all going to be working for them one day.
Yeah.
One way or another. So I'm sort of just embracing that a little earlier.
Yeah, that's right. You said in the workshop I did with you that you learn the most in life from your students. What are some examples of things that you learn just from teaching?
Well, you learn great lessons in what to do and what not to do. So it's amazing. But like I say in the workshops is as a working actor, I just constantly get to remind myself of what I should be doing when I'm out there. Because we all teach what we need to learn, whether we know it or not. So you're just constantly reinforcing what it is that you want to do in your own creative process by teaching other people, especially if you enjoy it. Now, there's a lot of teachers who talk the talk and don't necessarily walk the walk. And I think it's really important as I don't even like calling myself a teacher. Sometimes I like calling myself a facilitator. So it's important to walk the walk and not just, talk. Because I think if you talk the talk, you're basically coming from a place of ego most of the time or frustration that you're not, out there in the workforce. And that's not true for me. So I love, being an example of what I teach. And like my wife and I, in 2012, I was doing a musical with George Wendt called Reanimator, the musical based on a horror movie of the same name. And we went to the New York Music Festival and did a little thing on a Broadway stage. And then the whole cast flew to Edinburgh for the Fringe Festival in August of 2012. And my wife and I sold everything we owned here in L.A. We sold our cars, all of our clothes, our furniture. And she met me in Scotland, and then we just kind of improvised our way around the world for a year.
Wow.
And that's how I got over to Europe and established myself in London. I lived in London for 5 months and taught all over England, and I had a blast. And I've been back since, but I'm still looking forward to going back again. I love it over there. There's some really talented folks, and so a great improv community in London. There's Jules Munns, who runs the nursery and is about to open a new space, and Steve Rowe runs Hoopla and all the shows at the Miller Pub right near London Bridge, which is really cool.
How did you find the Brits reacting to comedy compared to your American audiences?
Well, they're really hungry for it. They're really the most interesting thing I found about most of the improv community in the UK is that they don't necessarily consider themselves actors. And what I mean by that is they don't have pictures and resumes, and they don't go on auditions and are not really interested in doing movies and television or being in a play on the West End, although I'm sure some of them wouldn't mind, but they don't aggressively seek that out. Whereas in America, everybody I've ever met in an improv workshop wants to be a movie star. So I found that mentality very different. But in the UK, it's really exciting to be over there because they're all so hungry for this art form. And they're really good at it, and they have a lot of fun doing it. There's some amazing performers over there. Carrie Ed Lloyd is one of the funniest improvisers I've ever met. She's in a group called, she's in two groups. One's called Grand Theft Impro, and the other's called Ostentatious, and they improvise a Jane Austen novel on stage whenever they perform. And they are brilliant, and you should check them out. If you get a chance to over in the UK.
How did you find Scotland? Did it make you drink your face off?
Oh, yeah. That's Disneyland for alcoholics. I love Scotland. I was there for the festival for a month, which was just amazing. We did 25 shows in 28 days. And I think I slept in darkness 3 days.
Wow.
I mean, it was because our shows were late at night, so we never got home before 5 a.m. and the sun came up at 4:30. But then a month traveling around, my wife actually never really drank much at all, let alone whiskey or much beer until we went to Scotland, and she fell in love. Of course, you can't help it, but over there. Cask Ale is amazing, and of course the whiskey and all the distilleries were really exciting to be around.
And so then you came back, but you had sold all of your earthly possessions. So you had to start from scratch. And this is just a couple of years ago. You had to, as a grown adult, buy everything all over again.
Well, that's why I said it's important to walk the walk. And so I basically improvised my life and then kind of, we sort of did what you're supposed to do in your 20s or your late teens is go backpacking across Europe. And we didn't exactly backpack, but it's sort of nice being, it's very cathartic to get rid of everything you own and to start over. And we have much less than we ever used to.
Yeah.
And there's no storage and boxes full of shit. And, what's really interesting is you realize, like, I got rid of all these things I had been hanging on to, like the jacket I wore in Home Alone.
Aww.
And the suit I wore on Seinfeld. And all this stuff was sitting in my closet, and I never really wore it. It was just kind of sentimental,
What did you do with them?
I gave them to an auction house, and they just auctioned it off at some movie memorabilia thing. And so what I learned is you're not getting rid of the sediment. You're just getting rid of the stuff. And it's so cathartic to get rid of stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to throw away things that have a personal meaning. That's pretty admirable. The suit from Seinfeld.
Yeah.
How was that?
What do you
Doing
mean?
Seinfeld, how was that?
That was a great show to work on. Yeah, it was really great. I mean, Larry David was definitely God, and everybody knew it. And it was probably the only TV show of that caliber that I ever worked on where there was no eggshells. Like, there wasn't any fighting, there wasn't any egos or temperamental. It was just, they surrounded themselves with really talented people, and everybody knew their job, and everybody did it really well, and it was just fun to be around.
And what was the dynamic like between Jerry and Larry? I mean, was it total even playing field? Or?
Oh, yeah, totally even. They were just really great guys. They were pretty down to earth, and we had a lot of conversations just about life and stuff that was going on in our lives at the time. It's exciting. One of the exciting things I got to work Larry David again on Curb Your Enthusiasm after that, which was fun. I was in the pilot for that. But I remember the exciting thing for me was showing up on the set, and I was excited to meet Michael Richards because I just thought he was, such a great character actor. And before I could even say hello, he shouted at me. He's like, "Hey, I know you. You do improv. You're brilliant. You do the same thing I do." And I was just like, I'm supposed to be saying this stuff to you. So that was sort of jaw-dropping, exciting moment. It was fun.
Yeah. And then did you guys ever get to improvise together?
No, there's not a lot of improv in those. Those shows are so well written. I mean, they're open to doing stuff. What you learn after being in this business for years and years is you go to the set, you deliver the goods in exactly what they want, the way it's written. And then if they're really smart and it's a collaboration, they'll let you do your own thing after they get what they want. And then 9 times out of 10, they'll do whatever you improvised after that. But they want to make sure they get whatever they want or what they've written or what they have in their minds in the can first. And then you're pretty much free to say, "Hey, could I try another one?" or "I have an idea." But you want to make sure that they get their whatever they want first. And then they're more likely to ask you to collaborate along with them.
Yeah. And have you ever, had a crack at creating and selling your own TV series? Have you gone down that road?
I've pitched a lot of stuff. I've written up a lot of treatments for stuff. I haven't been fortunate enough yet to have my own stuff sold or produced at this point. But I'm so happy just being creative entity, doing all these different things. And I love doing them. I mean, I would be happy to be on the other side of the camera and doing some kind of production work or writing. But I love doing what I'm doing. And, there's only so much time in a day. So
I think you would make a great director, having worked with you. Yeah, I think
write a show. I'll direct it.
Yeah, you're quick and you know how to really draw the comedy out of absolutely any
I'm for
moment.
hire. If you want to contact me, markbeltzman@gmail.com.
There you go. And so stuff remaining on the list that you, other than perhaps one day sell your own vehicle, things that you're looking to do in the near future? your own personal goals?
Just to keep being creative, to keep evolving, to become at some point an above title actor, which means your name comes before the title of the movie. To do more bigger roles with bigger actors and make bigger paychecks. I mean, we all want to evolve and grow, and that's part of it. I'm not really so much driven to be famous or recognized as much as I am just to go to the next level like everybody is of doing what they do best. And that's what I love doing. So.
You mentioned a big paycheck, though. Do you feel, you don't strike me as someone who would have a material bent to you, but you did just say big paycheck. So
sure.
How important is that? This is a great apartment. You're living what appears to be an amazing life right now. So what's actually missing? You even have a timeshare.
Yeah, we do.
You even have a vacation home. So what would you, if you had the big paycheck, what would you even do with it? What don't you have right now?
Oh, just the comfort of traveling more and being able to do, give my wife more of what she wants and be able to do those things together that, we'd love to do. We traveled through the Himalayas quite a few years back, and I'd love to do that again. We spent some time in Tibet and Nepal and Bhutan, and I still keep in touch with our guides from Tibet and Bhutan, and I would love to go visit those guys again. And Bhutan is one of the most amazing places I've ever been in my life.
Oh, I've always wanted to go to Tibet in particular.
It is really, really everybody bucket list thing that everybody should do.
Did you have any kind of spiritual awakening while you were there?
Oh, absolutely. That was really life-changing. When I was in Bhutan, we went to see the biggest tourist attraction there is a temple called the Tiger's Nest that's built into the side of a mountain in the 11th century. And so we rode horses for 2 hours, and then we got off the horses, and then we had to hike for another 45 minutes to a waterfall, and you cross on this bridge underneath the waterfall, and you're at the door of the temple. And when I got off the horse, I just started bawling like a baby. It was so moving. It literally brought me to tears. It was just that unbelievably beautiful, spiritual, and just so fortunate to be able to afford that trip and to be there with my wife was really moving to me. And then a couple years, well, it wasn't even a couple years, about a year later, I was watching a program, a documentary on happiness.
Oh, yeah.
That was produced by Michael J. Fox.
Oh.
And he was standing in the exact same spot I was when I started crying. And he goes, and he was holding his hands out, and they were steady. And he goes, look, I haven't took my meds today or anything. I don't know what's going on. But he goes, I feel great, and this place is amazing. And I got, I don't know if it was a vortex of energy in that spot that I felt that he was feeling the same thing, but it was a magical moment, and to see him in that same spot was very enlightening.
Did your wife cry when you bawled your eyes out? Did she cry with you?
I don't think so. Not at that moment, no.
That's interesting.
No, it was her dream to go there.
And you cried for her dream.
Well, it's really funny that I think that this happens a lot with people who are in a relationship or a friendship where you do it for the other person and then you end up getting more out of it than they do.
Yeah.
You go to a concert or go to a seminar or just to the beach or whatever. Like meeting Ram Dass in Maui last week. It was just sort of a friend said, oh, they go there every morning, Monday morning, and go swimming.
Well, if you have beliefs that fall in that range, theoretically, your wife is your spirit guides helping you in your life.
Oh, there's no question about that.
Yeah, she got you to that place where you cried because you were meant to go to that place and have that awakening.
You got
that moment,
I agree.
We'll wrap up, but as you are such a proactive working actor, I was curious, what's been the most horrific audition experience that you've ever had? Something just that's been like, oh, gosh, I wish I could forget this. Have you got any of those stories?
Well, there's plenty, and I'm sure I forgot them.
They don't come to mind. That's okay if they don't.
There's been some weird stuff. Over the years, I've been to so many. There was one where there was a TV series with Richard Lewis and Don Rickles that I was up to play. I think it was Richard Lewis's brother, and the breakdown said we're looking for a Stephen Wright type. And I was sitting in the waiting room with a bunch of actors waiting to go in, and Richard Lewis and Don Rickles go in the room, and then a half an hour passes, and you could hear all the laughter. It's like Don Rickles was doing his Vegas act in there. And the door opens, and people are literally coming out with tears streaming down their face. And out walks Don Rickles, out walks Richard Lewis, and then out walks Stephen Wright. And then the woman comes out and goes, Mark Beltzman, you're next. And it's like you have to go in and follow that. Wow. It was just kind of like a daunting task, to say the least.
And this was acting?
Yeah, that was for a TV series. It was to be a regular on a TV series.
How did it actually go when you got in there?
Oh, it was, I don't think they were interested in me at all at that point, especially after watching Don Rickles do his Vegas act. And,
right.
Who knows what that stuff.
Right.
You can't figure that out, and I don't even try anymore.
Is there anything that you would have done differently in your illustrious career?
Hindsight's 20/20. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I probably would have done differently, but nothing major that I even comes to mind that I care to talk about. Nothing specific.
Nothing that causes a regret.
No. I have no regrets.
Well, that's a good thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a good thing to say. Mm-hmm. And I guess the last final thing for advice you would wish to impart upon people, in a path of comedy and entertainment, the Mark Beltzman capsule.
It's stuff that you've already heard from me, and in that I teach in the workshop. It's pretty much, replace thinking with listening, make your partner look good, you look twice as good, being truthful, honest, and real, and being happy. Is really the key to all of this stuff, and what Abraham's all about. As she says, life is about being happy, healthy, dead.
Right.
And so that's what you want, is just to be happy and healthy. And if you have those things, then you're on the way to greatness already, and just get out of your own way.
Yeah.
That's really the key to acting, to improvisation, and to life in particular, is to eliminate self, to get out of your own way, to let it happen to you instead of you trying to make something happen. So just find those things that make you happy and do more of them. Like I say, figure out what's working and do more of it instead of trying to change and fix what's wrong. Changing and fixing things doesn't work. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is, this is like a landmark terminology thing, is you take the past and you put it where it belongs, which is behind you. You take the future and you put it in front of you, and you live in the moment so that you're living in your future right now,
right,
to enjoy where you're at while you're there. And you really have to be aware of those things, conscious of those things, in order to just eliminate self, get out of your own way. Figure out what's working, do more of it, and stop trying to change and fix things. How do you know the difference? Well, one makes you smile and one doesn't. So figure out what makes you smile and do more of it. And the rest of it will take care of itself.
It sounds like very sage advice. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And the best way I can vouch for you 1,000% as an amazing improv teacher. People should rush and flock. I know your classes sell out very quickly. What's the best way for people to keep tabs on where they can study with you?
I post everything on Facebook. So find me on Facebook. I have my own personal page. There's Mark Beltzman, The Art of Allowing Improv page. There's Mark Beltzman, Actor fan page.
Okay. So just find Mark Beltzman.
Yeah.
Look for the happy guy on Facebook.
Exactly. And just follow along. And I hope to, see more of you there in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mark Beltzman, sharing insights in comedy and lessons in life. Sincere thanks to Mark for joining us, and a shout out for our next show. We're completing the trifecta of improvisation. We've had UCB, Second City, and next episode we're going to talk with the incredibly talented Groundlings alum Sean Hogan, who shares incredibly openly about his life for 8.5 years on the Groundlings main stage, how he felt in conversations with Will Ferrell, and it is incredibly specific, and how it really feels to be living under the possibility that you can be plucked from obscurity and made great and famous by SNL. What happens if that doesn't happen? And I can tell you, Sean lets his guard down and shares like a true artist, giving us a glimpse into the deepest part of his psyche, revealing some of the scars that can only be formed by a life in Hollywood. Sean Hogan, next time on The Grey Escape. I'm out of here, figuring out how I can be an above-title actor. It's my new dream. Catch you next time on The Grey Escape.